Bob, welcome to the NASA Virtual PM Challenge. We're glad you could join us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's an
Let me
honor.
just Thank you. Let me just jump right in and have you talk to us. What advice do you have for project managers who want to make sure or who want to increase the likelihood that their team will be as highly effective as possible?
Hmm. It's a great question. One of the most important things with a good project is making sure that you get the right ideas up front. You get contingency plans, you get all those kind of issues resolved. You get the naysayers, you get that stuff out and ideas, potential flaws, but also you want really the lateral thinking, the crazy thinking, the wild thinking as well. So one of the things, there's been some great research done, primarily Google, and then some folks at the Harvard Business School built on that. There's some great book on that. But anyway, and they came up with there's one underpinning of the five different elements they found to be successful for the best teams. And that underpinning for the five elements was psychological safety. And what that means is essentially that everybody in the team feels like it's completely fine to speak up if they have a wild idea or if they've got a yeah, but or a question or a concern about something, regardless of status within an organization, hierarchy, longevity, what group they belong to, cultural, whatever it might be, right? They just feel like, hey, we're part of this group and we all have that right to speak up. And one of the cool things that the research shows is when we have that psychological safety, not only do people give input more readily and more quality and diverse input, they also tend to hold each other more accountable for giving that input, which is an interesting piece. So it's sometimes people think, oh, it's being coddling people. That's not at all the case, actually. It's in some ways it's a more rigorous, but a group rigor versus a harsh discipline kind of rigor, which actually suppresses psychological safety. But it's kind of a collective rigor that gets people saying, hey, you need to speak up now. If we walk out of a meeting and you say, yeah, we should have said this, you're like, say it. What are you doing? Don't hold it to yourself. This is a great group. You can do that in. So it really kind of sets that tone very powerfully. And it's not an easy thing to do, but that's something we'll give some more tips on that as well, about how to design a meeting to do that more, and of course have the right approach around it as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, psychological safety, creating this sense where people can contribute and hold one another accountable. Your second piece of advice or set of advice has to do around designing meetings. Can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. So there's two factors. Of course, there's both the process of how the meeting runs and your approach in running the meeting and the tone you set. And it all starts, of course, with a really clear, and this should come as no surprise, but a really clear agenda with here's what we're trying to accomplish in this agenda during this meeting coming up. And particularly for, if you're familiar with introverts and extroverts, so extroverts tend to think out loud, more spontaneously. Introverts think more deeply and want to have time to cogitate and really bring something in and play with it. So particularly if you want to have the introverted folks inclusive, to be clear up front to say, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's some things I'm going to ask of you. Start thinking about it now. And that's really helpful to tap into their best resources there. And so that's one big thing right there. And also to set a tone up front to be able to say, here's some of our guidelines for the meeting, how we react to each other. Right. So there's a number of ones can be helpful, but one of the most helpful ones is that no idea is above scrutiny and no person is below dignity. And that you can phrase this a lot of ways, but essentially it's the whole thing of we can throw out any ideas and the ideas have to stand on their own. It doesn't matter who said them. And we never belittle somebody or attack or, ad hominem attacks. Well, how would you know? You just started or anything like that. Those are completely off limits. Because of the detrimental effect to the ideation as well as, of course, to the person's morale. And we want people passionate and excited about what we're doing. So setting clear goals, expectations, a couple guidelines about behavioral expectations. And notice the ones I described, they're positive. It's about how to behave well together, not punitive ones. Punitive ones tend to actually have people coming in a negative thing. So, for example, you don't say, don't be late. You say, make sure to respect everyone's time and be here a couple minutes early so we can really be productive. That tends to prime people, it's a neuroscience term, but prime people to be in their best mindset when they walk in the door. So that's a really big place to start. Then also designing a meeting, there's a couple things that very few people do, but I've been facilitating meetings for 31 years all over the world, all kinds of meetings, tech, all kinds of cultures. And one of the things that's really helpful, particularly if you want folks that are not, don't have the right idea right at the top of mind, but they might have a half-baked idea, or they have an idea, but they're not sure if it's a good one, or they might have to think it out, is to say, during the meeting, okay, now I want to hear some ideas on this topic. And again, here's the specific goals. And ideally, it's posted where everyone can see it on the wall. So it's very clear. Everybody owns it. You don't have to look at papers. You don't have to like look back through your computer. It's all right there. And then say, I'm going to give you a minute to jot down some notes. So we call that solo time. Give some solo time, particularly sort of the deep introverts that do some really deep processing and come up with and are able to integrate, complex data. They have some time to do it. It also helps those of us like myself who are the extroverts slow down, put our own ideas down instead of sort of running into the meeting and sort of getting us into a little bit of a group think situation sometimes because we start all thinking about that first idea that's said. So the solo time allows the introverts to catch up. It also makes sure that when you start speaking, particularly if people write it down, you get a broader diversity of ideas. And that's really essential to the beginning of a brainstorming session. You want diversity. And by diversity, I mean different ways of thinking about it, different angles, different specialties, anything that can be different. And that tends to be much more fruitful once you get started. So that's a really big piece. And there's another piece also for helping people digest and have a lot stronger interaction is many times people have a half-baked idea, but they're afraid to say it because it might sound stupid. So there's a couple approaches that can be really helpful for that. So one is to encourage people up front to say, right now during this ideation stage, I want your brilliant ideas, I want your crazy ideas, your stupid ideas, even your illegal ideas. We won't do anything illegal. But the reason for that is because it sparks us and it gets us crazy. So we want that freedom. And what happens is it creates that psychological safety where people can say whatever comes to their mind. But so there's another piece to that then, which is sometimes to say, talk with the person next to you for a little while. We've already put out the flow of ideas. What are the things that are coming to your mind right now that you might want to do to build on this diverse set of ideas we've already put up? And ideally, they're posted where everyone can see it. So now we own the ideas. Instead of them trying to be in your head or in someone's piece of paper, we need to own them collectively. And that, by posting it, also we get less proprietary feeling individually. They're now ours. So when partners have conversation, a lot of times they're able to pursue a little bit of unknown or a curious question deeper than they feel comfortable saying in front of the whole group. And then they also can come out and say, well, we were thinking about this. And that solidarity helps people feel a lot more confident to share more ideas. So the brain scientist is really fascinating. There's great research on this one, which we won't go into right now, but it's really fascinating about using these different methodologies really can help tap into the brain power of your group and get you much further ahead, much faster.
Bob, this is really exciting to hear these tips about how to make meetings where a lot of teamwork happens, meetings be more effective for ideation, for creating psychological safety, for both introverts and extroverts. I appreciate those tips. You also had some thoughts about how the team lead, him or herself, could leverage their own style in order to get the most out of their teams. Can you talk more about that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I like the term you use, leverage your own style, because we all have strengths with our own different styles. And this is an important thing to think about. And not only value your own strengths, but value the other strengths in the room. Right. So I'm pretty much an extreme extrovert. That means I get a lot of energy off of other people. I think out loud. And it took me years to realize that the quiet introverts were often thinking more deeply than me. It wasn't that they didn't have ideas. It wasn't that they weren't thinking things through. They were actually thinking more deeply. That's the research shows. This is a little embarrassing to admit that sometimes they tend to think more deeply and come up with some more integrated ideas. Whereas extroverts add to the conversation by spicing things up and energizing us and moving us along. And it's like a great soup. You need the different ingredients to make it really effective. And this is a hard lesson for a lot of people to learn because we see the world through our own eyes and we assume the other ways are not so good. Should be like me. But truth is, we need all those ingredients. So if you are an introvert and you're leading a meeting, the ideas I said before about solo time, that'll appeal to you dramatically. If you're an extrovert, you're going to go, why? That's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. So part of what you can do, though, is no matter whether you're an extrovert or introvert or where along this spectrum you are, you can say, in this moment, I need to be able to dial up the introvert side of me. And even for myself, who is an extreme extrovert on most of those scales, I still need downtime. I still have to process internally some. I still get some of my energy from my own thoughts, just like an extreme introvert still get some energy from external stimuli, and they still can be spontaneous and just as confident as an extrovert, even if they're not showing it as much. So if you're an extrovert leading a meeting, it's easy to think that you don't need the quiet times or those thoughtful pieces. But it can be really helpful to force yourself by setting a time to say, all right, I'm going to just write down notes for 60 seconds before I talk out loud, and to see what I can come up with. And not only does that help you think more deeply, like the introverts tend to do, but it allows the introverts that time that really not only helps them ideate well, but they also feel more validated and included. And if you're an introvert, you can dial up a little bit, because introverts are often thinking, I haven't thought it through yet, so I'm not going to say anything. And then the topic goes by. And so every once in a while, you can dial it up. You don't want to do this all the time, because it would burn you out to be different than your style, but you're thinking, wait a second, my ideas have importance, and maybe it's half-baked right now, but it's worth saying now. Dial up that ability to just speak out directly and strongly, because we all have that, regardless of how quiet you are generally. And then you can even just say, hold on just a second. I've got an idea. It's not fully formed, but I want to share it as it is and see if we can build on it. Something like that. So, and you can even see me using my hand gestures, right? So extroverts tend to use a lot more hand gestures. They get more attention that way. So you can dial that up as an introvert. Be a little bit bigger, use hand gestures, get attention. And obviously that feels awkward and you don't want to do it all the time, but there's times to dial it up to make sure that you are being heard. And also, just one other little quick thing here is, if you're an extreme extrovert, use that skill to leverage that to say, hold on a second, there's a few people we haven't heard from yet. You'll have any ideas, and then pause and shut up until they answer, even if it's to say no. We don't, but let them think. Because the extrovert is comfortable with about 2 seconds of quietude, and introverts might be comfortable with like 15. So don't go on our own discomfort level. That's not the point. Meetings are not to feel safe and comfortable all the time. The meetings are about getting the best ideation.
This is great. It's exciting to hear how introverts or extroverts don't have to abandon themselves or be totally different from themselves. They just have to know themselves and then practice dialing up, dialing down different aspects of themselves to make the space appropriate, safe, and productive for their team members.
Ooh, good summary.
Bob, this has been great advice. Do you have any parting thoughts for team leads, team managers about effective teams, making your teams highly effective, and promoting psychological safety?
Absolutely. One of the lessons that came hardest to me was sometimes just go ask people what they need. Not that people always know, but ask, what do you need to make this meeting productive for you? In advance. We often think about only asking feedback about the past, but sometimes ask for feed forward for the future. Hey, what would be helpful next time? A lot of people aren't going to go with the advice I gave you, because this is science-based from the research around human dynamics, but they'll at least say, I didn't have any chance to speak, or people talked over me, and you can translate it into a better design.